The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal Piston Rings. I'm Joe Costello, back again, and super excited to be back with the Director of Technical Sales from Total Seal Piston Rings. Been a minute or so, Mr. Keith Jones. Keith, welcome. How are you?
I am doing great, and to you, thank you, Joe, for having me back on. It's great, and like I say, been a little bit. It's been a pretty crazy year. Very, very busy. Always trying to develop new product, work on new strategies. Come up with the latest next thing, and that takes up a little bit of your time. But here we are again, and would just say glad to be here.
Well, this one is exciting in that it's poignant, right? It's a happening now kind of episode, which we just had a huge milestone out there in the world of NHRA Camping World Drag Racing, in the world of Pro Stock Motorcycle, where Vance and Hines swept the first ever 3-race-long Western swing, which is a big deal. Guys like Greg Anderson and John Force and Joe Amato and Antron Brown had been the only people to do it. There's a full list. Corey Mack is involved. I got to make sure I say everybody. Dan Fletcher, Larry Dixon, Tony Schumacher, that's everybody. They had the first ever opportunity to do it with Pro Stock Motorcycle because it was the first time they ever went to all 3 races, and they did it. And, of course, they've got their new Suzuki program, and they use Total Seal Piston Rings, and so we had to bring him on. What do you know about Andrew and Vance and Hines, though, before we bring him on, Keith?
Well, I would just say I know what I've read. This will be the first time that Andrew and I have had a conversation. I've been to the shop. I've worked with these guys for quite some time. They actually, here at the shop, they deal with, Kevin on a regular basis, but I have dealt with him in the past, and I just know that they've always been on the cutting edge. I've been, like you said, I've been to the shop, talked with Eddie quite a bit, and, it's a state-of-the-art facility. These guys are, they're not leaving any stones unturned. They're not just throwing parts at it. They're developing, they're testing, they're engineering. They are that cut above, and that's why the name is who it is and why that legend is associated with that name. They go at this just like just like a Warren Johnson or any of the Pro Stock guys would, and NASCAR teams. I mean, they come at it with all the technology.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think a lot of people are going to be excited too. Terry Vance, Byron Hines, of course, Matt, and our guest, Andrew Hines, joins us now, the winningest Pro Stock motorcycle racer in history, who has now turned crew chief and doing a great job. Andrew, welcome to Hidden Horsepower.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good to be here.
Yeah. So you guys did something that has never been done before. That's pretty cool and hard to do these days. You're just days out from the accomplishment. How do you feel about it?
I think hard to do is an understatement. That was a pretty grueling 3 weeks. It's not untypical for our teams to go 3 races in a row. We've done that multiple times throughout the last 10, 15 years of Pro Stock Motorcycle. But the difference between Denver and Seattle and Sonoma is quite drastic. I mean, especially running the Suzuki up there on the mountain. That was something that we hadn't really had much success with in the last couple of years. The V-twins kind of beat us up there. Matt Smith was showing us the way, but we kind of adapted some new technology that we've been working on here. Thinking about Denver specifically, we knew it was going to be the last one to run there. So why not throw the gauntlet at it and figure out how to make a Suzuki run there a little better? So we modified a couple engines and took them up there, and it was a priority to run as good as we could at a track that basically was our home facility for a long time. So when we got that one out of the way, that was pretty fantastic. And then we just kind of took it back to business as usual. And with Gaige riding the bike this year the way he is, it made Seattle and Sonoma kind of our normal standard here lately, going killer 60 foot, and that just equated to monstrous ETs at the finish line.
Yeah, you've had some of the quickest or the quickest ever 60-foot times. We got to go track down Hector Jr. to find out like exactly the quickest he's ever run, but certainly some big numbers. And for our audience, Keith, I think we've got a lot of dirt track engine builders, a lot of drag racing engine builders, a lot of late model stuff. I think it's going to be very interesting to query Andrew on how this Suzuki program is a little bit different. The V-twin stuff that you guys rode, like when you were the Harley team, that I guess is similar with the big pistons and all. But the Suzuki program, relatively new. You guys have got billet cases now. You've really forged ahead with what technology is available and capable in pro stock motorcycle. Let's start at the beginning, I guess, as best as we can, Andrew, with Vance and Hines. You guys, Byron and Terry, competitors, friends, started years ago, exhaust pipes, parts, pieces. It has blossomed into this, where you guys are involved in, of course, drag racing and pro stock motorcycle, but all kinds of different motorcycle racing programs. You now guys even do truck exhaust.
Yeah, we run everywhere now. I mean, we even have road racing baggers that run in Moto America that are running the Harley 131 cubic inch motors at 7,000 RPM and making nearly 200 horsepower and being reliable with total steel piston rings. I mean, it's a cool deal. I mean, but going all the way back, like you said, something that came up across the Western swing was there was a guy that stopped by our trailer in Seattle. He was there on Thursday while we were setting up, and he brought a picture of a really old motorcycle. And I was looking at him, and, it was clip-on handlebars, lay-down bike, skinny 7-inch slick tire, maybe even a 6-inch slick tire back then. And he's like, your dad built this bike in 1974. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, that's cool. But then it dawns on me, my dad built that motorcycle when he was 25 years old, fresh out of the Army and working at RC Engineering. And he just, he learned from those guys back in the day and figuring out, he was always mechanically inclined and working on cars and trucks and riding his dad's motorcycle back in the 60s. But to see somebody, come out to Seattle, the first event the Pro Stock Motorcycle had been to ever up there, and we got nostalgic people from back in the day showing us really cool images of motorcycles that have been around that started the history of Pro Stock Motorcycle. Kind of hit home there for a minute. So kind of clicked on there that, my dad was, the pioneer with Terry at the beginning of bringing pro stock motorcycle and motorcycle drag racing to the forefront at that time. All the stories that they come up with every day is absolutely mind-boggling. I wish I could write them all down and remember them years on down the road. So through the 70s, my dad worked at RC Engineering with Terry Vance, and through 78, 79, they decided that they maybe needed to branch out on their own to further better what they wanted to do. And they started Vance and Hines in late 1979, and it was primarily exhaust systems and ignition point systems for motorcycles that were out there and doing upgrades on bikes and overboring cylinders and things like that. And then it turned into primarily the exhaust division of Vance and Hines through the mid 80s and the big push into the 90s with the Harley exhaust market. But drag racing and any type of racing was never out of the mind of those guys. It was always the push. Even after Terry retired in 1988, the next push was my dad to go racing in the early 90s in pro stock, and it turned into my brother racing in 1996, and shortly thereafter in 2002 I started racing, and it's just been the progression ever since. But the heritage of Vance and Hines is finding the next level of performance in any part of the engine. We know that horsepower makes ET, and if you compare that with a good chassis setup, it goes a long way on winning races.
I always compare you guys within pro stock motorcycle to a version of a Formula One team, if that makes sense. Smaller scale, but you have all the technology and you build and make whatever you need that you think will work, and maybe it does or maybe it doesn't, and then you go back and you do it again within that realm of NHRA Pro Stock Motorcycle. And then you take that technology, what you learn, and you apply it to products that people can buy for their own stuff and use it. And it maybe sounds better. It's definitely faster and quicker. Is that a crazy analogy?
Formula One level, definitely not. But as far as for comparison's sake, probably yes. As far as the class leader in technology and performance on the track. I got a lot of good guys here that work, relentlessly to try and make these parts as good as we can design them and as good as we can conceptualize them. So, the technology we have nowadays versus, back when my dad was really pioneering everything, what you can do with a $400 3D printer now to prototype things and try intake systems or throttle bodies or things like that on the engine or airbox pieces or chassis jig parts. Just the list goes on of what you can do in a quick time frame with minimal effort and a little bit of CAD design. So we try and push as far as we can. We have a lot of cool machines. We have a lot of resources here, but sometimes things don't need to be over engineered. They can just be, I call it flat plate 2D technology, and you can make a lot of cool things happen with fixturing or developing the first concept before you go to 5-axis machining or just a standard 3 or 4-axis mill. So it's really cool, and there's been so many different things that have led to the success of Vance and Hines, and now with them moving into the truck market, like you mentioned earlier, it's taken a step away from the motorcycle realm and going into the car world, but it's something that needed to be done for the evolvement of the company. It's motorcycles are unfortunately dwindling out there. Not as many production models coming out of all the major manufacturers. So the evolution was to go with 4 wheels that are still out there and proud. So it's cool that they're out there. We got to go to SEMA last year and debut the Vance Hines truck line and get people excited about it. And we got it all plastered all over the back of our trailer. It's drag races, and it has popped up so much interest upon, the NHRA consumer, I believe, is probably heavy on driving pickup trucks. And there's been so much that has come out of that. It's been really cool.
Keith, jump in with a question for Andrew.
Well, Andrew, I mean, it's being a drag race guy, and I've been around this, all my life, and, watching you guys from, the early days to now, and I'm going to make a couple of comments that people may not like, but, and we'll just say, I grew up riding, we'll say, Japanese motorcycles, and I love the American V-twin. I love that market. I love that product. But when the V-twin came into the pro stock world, I would just say I thought there was a lot of generosity there that made things a little lopsided in my humble opinion. But it's great to see for me, it's like, I mean, I'm an RPM guy. I'm the comp eliminator, 11,000 RPM, 287 inch, small block lover. And it, for me, it stokes me to see how the inline 4s are running. And where I'm going with all this is, where did you guys turn that corner? Is it the advent of, better parts, the billet blocks, because kind of what Joe was saying earlier, which you guys, you can go on Summit's website and buy a whole lot of really cool parts and build you a big block Chevy. Not so much for what you guys do. You got to build it, develop it, prototype it. So, is it parts technology? Is it engine development technology with Suzuki and yourselves? We'll just say, where did this come from? It's kind of a big loaded question, but.
Going from the V-twin stuff, our roots with Vance and Hines were always 4-cylinders. Back in, the 80s, there was Hondas and Suzukis and Kawasaki's, and everything that came through Vance and Hines, they won on. And, the V-twin thing was just a proponent of sponsors wanting to bring something new into the class. So, once we had our run there at 20 years with Harley-Davidson and V-twins, our natural progression was to go back to our roots and go to 4-cylinders. Through that whole time frame, we were supplying Vance and Hines customers with our 2-valve version of the GS-based platform from way back. That's like the 350 Chevy of the motorcycle world. It's the GS 1150. It's just everybody built parts for it. It was the easiest thing to get parts for, and it's just the workhorse. So going back to the Suzuki, there was another company out there that had pushed their 4-valve cylinder head to get it approved for NHRA. And once that came about, we approached NHRA and said, well, we'd like to do our own version of it. The one that's out there it was designed probably 12 years ago now. And it wasn't designed for pro stock. It was designed for some other categories. Once NHRA wanted to help out the 4-cylinders a little bit versus the V-twins, it was accepted as a platform for NHRA, and we were allowed to go down our road to design a 4-valve head as well. So that's where, the cylinder head reliability has come about. With the 4 valves, the valve train is way more controlled. It's still a dual overhead cam, spinning 14,000 plus RPM. Some of these things are going 14.2, 14.3 out there. But still the biggest holdup right now is one, the cases were a major problem. Once we went to the 4-valve platform, power levels went up, efficiency went up, RPM is really about the same because the limiting factor is the crankshaft right now. But the power level went up so high, and then as the 4-valve platform proved itself, by us making it faster and other teams, Steve Johnson, those guys making it faster, they had to start stacking weight on the 4 cylinders, and then all of a sudden you have to accelerate that extra mass. And when you're still trying to go 103 60 foot at either 600 pounds or 640 pounds, it just applies so much more load and stress to the cases through the clutch into the primary gear of the crankshaft. It literally was splitting the cases in half because you have to move it. You got to get the RPM up. You got to throw the clutch at it at the right time. And we went through, I think between our 2 bikes last year, we went through about 11 sets of cases. So we had already been in the works on the billet case, which was our fix for the cases. And those came out this year, had those in the approval process for more like the last couple of years. Finally got the prototype set done, delivered to NHRA in Dallas last year. And that's proved huge for reliability. We haven't had any problems there. Knock on wood, luckily the first design has been the only design. We haven't had to remake anything, retool anything. It's been all good, and it did not allow us to achieve any more horsepower. It's just reliable from run to run, where we're not coming back to the shop and swapping out cracked cases. We're actually coming back to the shop and working on improvements to find more horsepower. So last year was such a burden with coming back and knowing that more than likely the cases are cracked and they're not going to make it through the next race, so we got to fix them. But the next evolution on that is a plain bearing crankshaft, and we have approval from NHRA now to work on that for next season. So that'll require another version of our Vance Hines billet cases. It's going to have plain bearing mains, plain bearing rods, split rods, but the packaging is tight. We can't just, I guess we could, but as a company, we want to be nice enough to our competitors and any of our customers that buy this equipment where they don't have to buy a case and redo their whole chassis or redo a whole motor plate. A lot of it's going to be drop-in pieces. So at the sacrifice of keeping everybody happy and keeping costs under control, where people don't have to buy a new chassis or build a new exhaust pipe or different things like that, it'll be more of a drop-in, but I have to find compromises in the design of where the transmission can be laid out in the case and where how the split rods are made. So we're working in that aspect right now. It's going to be about a 6-month project, which we just got the approval this past weekend. So we'll be testing that hopefully prior to Gainesville next year, and that'll be the next thing that'll allow us to go a little higher in RPM. It's just a multiplier on torque, right? So we can go out there and see if we can spin these things a little bit higher. I mean, not that we really want the piston to go through that abuse, but a couple of hundred RPM here and there would be good.
I found it interesting that you guys were using stock cases up until very recently, up until this billet case approval, which meant, as crazy as it seems, like hunting through junkyards, like finding cases, getting cases, and a stock case would not last very long, and all kinds of crazy modifications, like very old school style. Like you had to do things to shore it up and make it last and live and all of that. And finally, NHRA gives the approval for you guys to just go ahead and make one that's going to be better. And I think the sport is clearly better for it. And I love the fact that we see 200-mile-per-hour runs now on a fairly regular basis. Not that they're related, but that you can work on performance instead of scouring junkyards.
Yeah, exactly. That was tough. We were using new stock 1150 cases up until, we just ran out probably last year. Suzuki made a run of stock cases. They retooled the dies in probably the late 2000s, and they were pouring more modern aluminum into it. And everything was way better than the stock OE case from 35 years ago. And everything worked fine in a 2-valve engine at 375 horsepower and turning 13,800 to 14,000 RPM. But now the power level went up, the weight went up, and like I said, it's just a ticking time bomb in the engine on whether they're not going to make it through a crankshaft failure or a piston failure. That's the problem. But just normal race wear was 5 runs, 6 runs on some sets. Now, most of those sets were the ones we had to get out of a junkyard because all that new stock 1150 stuff had been depleted. So at some point people were, it was almost worth their weight in gold. They were crazy expensive. People charging $5,000-$6,000 for a set of cases that were unused. But then all of a sudden you have to buy a set of $1,200 cases out of a junkyard, still covered in dirt and grime from the bike they came out of, that was put in the junkyard 25 years ago. So, the need for them has been there for a long time. It would have mitigated a lot of problems with even just a normal run-of-the-mill explosion on the track. It wouldn't have thrown a rod through the case. It wouldn't have ripped the whole side of the engine off. It would have alleviated a lot of pain for people in the past. But the need was really ramped up when the 4 valves came around 3 years ago, and we were the first ones to step up to the plate for the billet case. It's a major investment. It takes about 75 hours of machining to make everything that's needed for the case, between the transmission access door, the oil pan, the ignition cover, clutch cover, everything that goes into it. It's a nearly 2-week process per case that we make. So we make them in batches of 3, 6, or 8 right now. At first we did 3s because we were trying to get them to everybody that needed them. The MSR team, the war team, Kelly Klontz, anybody that needed engine cases. We weren't just hogging them for Vance and Hines. It was all right, we keep 1, we sell 2. And then the next batch, we keep 1, we sell 4. So it worked out to get them out there in the field quickly. That way we didn't want to have that bad for the class, with people having issues and having to work on that problem throughout the season. We wanted to get out there early.
Well, one of the things that I look at, and it's kind of a comment and a question, is also, like you say, reliability, trying to keep the costs down. Like you say, you're failing cases every weekend. That's expensive to build. That's expensive to fix. But was there a consideration from a safety point of view? Because, like any engine out there, tires don't like to drive over oil. And, as everybody knows, you're riding on it, not in it. And getting off at 200 miles an hour can never be a good thing. So did NHRA ever, was there ever a look at it from a safety point of view, just going, hey, we got to come up with something where we can keep the rods in the engine if we were to have a failure? Was that ever a consideration or part of the consideration?
Years ago, NHRA implemented making sure that the bottom side of the motorcycles are sealed up as good as they can be to prevent oil escaping if there was a failure. So we don't run like a top fuel diaper or anything like that, but we do run pig mat in the bottom of the oil belly pans. There's walls on all the belly pans and fairings that are out there now to prevent most of the oil from getting out. Most of the oil typically that you'd see coming out of a motorcycle, if there's an engine failure, comes through the vacuum pump scavenge system. So as soon as there's a window in there and you got 25 inches of vacuum on it, then all that oil just goes through the vacuum pump out into the catch can and overflows the catch can. And if that's not baffled right or designed right, then obviously it'll overflow and go right out the back of the bike. So typically if you see oil on a racetrack like Joe, we had this past weekend that Hector Jr. kept talking about.
Yep.
That's typically a vacuum scavenge problem where there's usually a vacuum leak in the engine. Somebody left the cover loose or something like that, and it's drawing air through and overflows the catch can and out it goes. So as far as the other safety aspect, though, where the billet cases saved us, we blew an engine up in Gaige's bike, unfortunately, in Norwalk, second round of eliminations, which is why he lost that round. And it threw the number 3 rod off the crankshaft. And that's very reminiscent of when I started racing, before I even started racing, when I was testing for my license. I was at a track in Oklahoma City, Thunder Valley, and not many people probably know this story, but it was like my 6th or 7th run ever on a pro stock motorcycle. I was using old worn out parts from my brother that we just pieced an engine together, and we struggled with some carburetors and jetting, and it kept bogging off the starting line, and finally we got it right, and I made it to about 1,000 foot, threw the number 3 rod off, and on the stock case, when you throw number 3 off, that's right where the exhaust collector is for the 4-in-1. And my bike turned into a fireball in the shutdown area. So Luckily now, with the billet case, if you throw a rod off, it doesn't throw all the oil out of the engine. So that's a improved safety factor. When I design these cases, typically, probably 95% of the time, the engine and the rod, it likes to throw it out the front. Very rarely have we seen one go back towards the clutch or transmission or out the back of the case. So it definitely helps in that aspect. The last thing you want is your nice, $175,000 motorcycle going up in flames.
No doubt.
Well, I want to throw a dumb question at you because you brought up the number 3 rod thing, and
Yep.
being having had many motorcycles, I know I've owned Kawasaki's, Honda, Suzuki's. I've had a bunch. Currently, I've got Suzuki, older SV1000, but what a fun bike! Lightweight, torquey as hell. Just a fun machine. But I've had Kawasaki's, I've had ZX's, I've had that. And what is it about the number 3 in the motorcycle engine? Because that is the one at least for me and the people that I'm around, that is the one you always hear to be the failure. So is it obviously an oiling thing, or is there something else?
Well, on all the GS stuff and all the center drive chain crankshafts from back in those days, that's right where the primary gear drives the clutch. So that one's getting the most amount of torque and flex through that part of the crank, and it seems to be the one that is the major culprit on that. And assuming it's just from deflection from the clutch pushing itself away, you could get some weird scavenge coming off it with the oil there. But seems like number 3 is the most picky. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've thrown number 1 off when typically it's either 1 or 3. Can't really describe that, or can't really put a pinpoint on that one. Combustion analysis says that it always should be number 1, but it must be something just in the inherent design of a flat plane crank with driving next to number 3 that becomes the major problem.
Like say a harmonic or some kind of I get it. So well, thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. Flat cranks are, we both know, difficult.
I didn't know that.
Exactly.
I didn't know that Keith Jones was such a motorcycle guy. I didn't know that, Keith.
I would just say I've been riding motorcycles before I had a driver's license.
There you go. Andrew, since this is Hidden Horsepower presented by Total Seal, we've learned over the episodes of this podcast how the rings have changed, right? Rings packages have changed. They're thinner, the different coatings, all the whole gamut of concepts that we've covered over this deal. How about in motorcycles? Does it track with Pro Stock? Does it track with everything else? Thinner, narrower, different coatings? Do you just apply that to your setups, or is it something different that the 14,000 RPM combination wants? And you mentioned to me when I asked you on the show, like, not only do you use Total Seal, you've got a Rottler, so it sounds like you're right in line with the technology that is current right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, keeping the cylinder pressure where it should be above the rings is priority, and we've always gone down that road. Especially, I'd say probably the last 10 years has been the biggest push on that on our side. For a while it was just like, all right, let's just run it on a rod hone and put some sort of crosshatch in it with some sandpaper and you're good to go. But that's come and gone by a long distance now. Our Rottler hone has been huge on keeping the cylinders round. That's been phenomenal having that machine in our shop here for the last 5 years. And then working with the guys at Total Seal, they're always pushing the envelope on what they want to do. And, always talking with Matt at the racetrack, trying to figure out what's your newest technology you got that's going to be the trickle down from what these crazy Pro Stock guys are constantly trying to do. And, the effect is there. And I feel like we're always trying to find that next little avenue, whether it's, we tried the conform cut years ago, we tried gas ported rings, and everything has been just that little bit of uptick here and there whenever we needed it. Especially on our V-twin back in the day, with a 5 1/8 inch bore, you really need to make sure that thing's round and you got the right ring in there to capture all the pressure. So we tried so much stuff over the years. I mean, we were running what was it, Keith? Probably a 1.2 mil ring for a long time. And by the time we were done with our program 2 years ago, we were down to like the 027, 028 ring. So on Suzuki's,
you guys migrated all the way down to the .7s. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So And with Suzuki, we've gone even thinner. So we've had some things that we've R&D'd over the years to try, but it seems like that .7 is the winner as far as reliability over time and cost and performance. It's been working really good. And then the RPM thing is the killer. I mean, for spinning 14,000 RPM with a stroke and rod ratio we have, the piston's going through some serious speed, and trying to figure out what coating it needed to live, especially in the high. You say high temperature, but I say high temperature, but it's for such a small amount of time. But with these engines making 3.6 horsepower per cubic inch, they are putting out some major heat on every cycle, and it's an air-cooled engine wrapped in bodywork that has no airflow going through the motorcycle, and it is really, really angry when it gets to that last 300 feet of the racetrack. So finding that right combination of ring thickness and coating has been huge, and those guys at Total Seal knocked it out of the park for anything we've ever needed.
Wow, I'll just go to my good old boy, where he aims to please.
It's the truth. I mean, they got good stuff, and we've used them for, man, how many years has it been now? I don't even know. I mean, I know when we started the Harley program, we ordered custom ring sets for you guys that we had to buy. It just gives us for our specific bore size only back in the day.
Oh yeah, you were right there, and it was funny you mentioned the rod hone thing, because the very first time I came by your shop, and got the tour, and it was you guys were honing on a rod hone, so it was like, okay, it is so great to see. Well, what's so funny is different industries, different segments of the industry adopt technologies at different speeds, and at that time that was how it was done. That's what guys in the motorcycle world did, and you guys are I'll call it one of the very, very earliest, if not the earliest adopter of of the technology. And like I say, got involved with Rottler, got the diamond head, got the 6-stone head, I think your 6 might have an 8 or a 10. But looking at board geometry, ring technology, it's it may be strapped in a motorcycle, but it's still an engine, and the same rules apply whether it's 500 inches or. Now this is going to sound stupid. What is the displacement on yours? 1400 cc? I mean, what is it?
It's a 1850, so it's 113 cubic inches.
Okay, so I'm saying I didn't know, so I went to the dumb guy. But the technology applies, So that's the thing. Working with you guys and the willingness to, as you say, try the conform ring, try the to try things. That's we got to test it to try it to move forward. And we'll say love that working relationship. To throw out the crazy ideas and have you go, yeah, we'll try that.
Yep, and then working with oil manufacturers, and we work really closely with David at High Performance Lubricants, and finding the right package for the hone. The hone for the RPM is different than it needs for a 10,500 Pro Stock. For this ring pack, for this piston design, and then working with the oil we got, just there's a constant evolution, Joe. It's just trying to find what this package wants, because we've gone down different roads in the past with, let's what's the next best thing? Let's try this oil, and we throw it in there, and all of a sudden our pistons are just pumping oil out the exhaust pipes. Like, well, that didn't work with this ring package or this ring. Everything has to work progressively together, and we've been working with Rottler and all those guys on what next diamond heads coming out, what stones we might use. Our guy Scott here that works on the drag race team at the racetrack, he's our home guy when we're here at the shop. So he's in the engines at the shop, he's in the engines at the racetrack, and we're trying to make sure that everything is right all the time. And he's in constant contact with Ed at Rottler, trying to find that next avenue, because the days of finding 5, 6, 7 horsepower in a I guess if you're in a pro stock car world, you're looking for the 5, 6, or 7 because you're making 1,500 or 1,400. But for us, making 400 horsepower right now, we're trying to find those 1s and 2s. And if a extra 3 pops up on the board, that's pretty impressive. But it's so refined right now with the push from the entire industry that these engines are really great in your first concept, and then it just takes that little bit of refinement to make them that little bit better that might find you the next 100th and a half at the racetrack.
Little shout out to Scott Screamin, works on the team, of course, and Ed from Rottler. Really interesting, but the number that shocked me, Andrew, we never talk about it in that context, but maybe we should. 3.6 horsepower per cubic inch out of a pro stock motorcycle engine.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty.
Yep,
that's like we talk 3 horsepower per cubic inch out of a Pro Stock engine approximately, and it's a big deal. And they're the pinnacle of naturally aspirated. But I don't know. Like, I think you guys maybe should get a little more love for that.
That's out of a air-cooled engine too. I mean, if we could get some water cooling in the thing, it'd be making way more power at the finish line than it is right now. It's just trying to get these things cooled down between rounds is difficult. The amount of heat they put out is insane. When I'm on the dyno and making back-to-back pulls, if I'm in an R&D session, I can only make about 14 pulls a day due to just the cool down time it takes from one run to the next. It's just blowing a fan across it and wait until the cylinder head temperature gets back to a specific number. If you miss it by 5 degrees, you might as well just throw that run away and come back again at the next right temperature the next time. So the difference between, like if I go in the dyno room and break a motor in, making that same tune-up run that's just going up to 12,500 RPM, which is kind of the warm-up first pull of the day, do that a couple times. I can make a pull every 7 or 8 minutes. Once I start ripping it up to 13.5, just that last 1,000 RPM that takes a second and a half, it takes an extra 10 minutes to cool it down. It's insane how much more heat those things can put out at that power level.
Yeah, no, heat's the enemy. I mean, it's one of the things that we battle with, in almost every end of what we do, whether it's, from diesel applications to Pro Stock motorcycle, it's getting rid of the heat. It's finding a way to move that heat out of there, and that's, as you and I both know, I mean, through the piston, into the ring, into the wall, and then out. And in your case, your coolant is the airflow and the lack thereof. It's just, that's the battle, and it's part of the challenge that we have to deal with ring materials and coatings, all the things that you've talked about, how it's honed. I get the calls every day about, how do I hone my stuff? And it's, you need to tell me everything you can about it. It's not just a one thing fits all kind of a program. What are you doing with this thing? What's the RPM? What's the cylinder? And heat is the enemy. So I definitely, realize what you guys are dealing with there. It's insane.
All right, before we let you go, Andrew, and Keith, I want you to prepare your last question for Andrew. But I got to ask you for a story about, like, growing up with your legendary dad and your brother. You're out on the tour. You referenced a couple. You already told us one where you went to a ball of flames. But there's no way that, you've been out here you're doing this, like, your entire life has been part of not NHRA, but being over the road, motorcycle races, representing a family business, all of that you don't have one queued up that would be fun and entertaining for the Hidden Horsepower audience.
There's so many, Joe. There's probably some I shouldn't talk about either, but
those are the ones we want, Andrew. No, whichever one you got you think makes sense, lay it on us.
Oh, it's just so many different memories over the years, and from seeing people, Columbus racetrack back in the day, seeing people jet ski in the parking lot because we got so much rain that weekend. That was something that stuck with me for a long time. It was like '96 Columbus, and there's been some other interesting things that have happened in Columbus with cars exploding in pit areas and things like that.
Yes.
But there's
sorry.
Not rental cars. We're not going down that road. That was I heard a race car explode in Columbus one year. Just amazing stuff all around. I mean, watching performances of some of these cars and motorcycles throughout the years, there's just, God, I wish I could pinpoint one thing that's phenomenal. I mean, I remember going to Topeka when I was, probably 10, 11 years old. Jim Epler going 498 in his funny car, and seeing the first 300 mile an hour run in a funny car. I'm a history buff on the sport. I'm a very stat minded guy. I'm not just a motorcycle guy. I try to keep everything in my brain about everything that goes on at the track all weekend long. We're constantly listening to the PA, hearing what you guys are saying about runs. But it's just it's cool to be involved in drag racing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it right now. We got great people coming out to the tracks and packing in these stands. Even Sonoma this past weekend was probably the most full I've seen it. It's just it's phenomenal. But there's been some after hours antics that have happened over the years, and probably most notably lately is the with Mission Foods coming aboard and Ryan Ayler trying to find different ways to create fun situations with cardboard cutouts and tortilla chips. There's stories all around. If people really want to get to know what's going on, they can come ask us at the ropes, and we can divulge more.
Yeah, no, that's that that makes perfect sense. And before we get to Keith's final question, you did reference it though. Okay, you guys run a shorter season than everybody else. Certainly the Top Fuel and Funny cars, and you're in crunch time now. Right, you've had an unbelievable season with Gaige Herrera, your new racer here in 2023. He's won 6 races. You won the Pro Stock Call-Out. You won some Mission Foods Too Fast, Too Tasty challenges. For those people who don't know what those are, you can go and look them up on NHRA's website. But there's been a lot of bonus races added this year, which has made for a lot of fun and excitement and all kinds of good stuff. And certainly we encourage you to watch the coverage. But how do I say this delicately other than not even trying to? If you guys don't win the championship after all of this, you will be very angry. That is my assessment. No. What about yours?
Yeah. Well, let's hope it doesn't go like when I won in 19, I kind of crushed it all through the regular season also, kind of like Gaige is doing, but I really had a terrible countdown. So my goal is to not shoot myself in the foot and make too many changes to the engine where I get lost, and that's really what happened in 19. But like you said, we've had this wave roll. We're just riding this wave right now, and I really don't see any problems with us the rest of the year as long as we have all our parts lined up, ready to go, fresh crankshafts and fresh sets of CP pistons and all that to drop in there. So we ran really well through the countdown last year with both bikes, so I don't see any issues with track to track, different types of weather, different things like that. So really looking forward to the rest of the year. This month of off in August, since the motorcycles aren't running Topeka and Brainerd, is well needed for us and the entire class. I mean, parts attrition through the Western swing is tough on everybody. And with all these 4-cylinder Suzukis, we make all the crankshafts here at Vance Hines for everybody. So our guys in the machine shop are making 15 more sets of all the crank parts right now, and we'll get make sure everybody's stocked up for the end of the year. So it's going to be good. I think Gaige is he's in the middle of a great confidence building time right now. We had a couple of struggles there in Bristol and Norwalk, but getting that rebound in Denver and then going back to sea level and keeping the bike in the performance window that it is. I mean, the 60 foot this chassis and Gaige are capable of putting out. I mean, the clutch setup, everything is on point. I got Jay Krawick, who's Ed's little brother. He does all the clutch maintenance on Gaige's bike, and if he sees something out of spec, he lets me know. We keep track of everything. If we got to drop some plates in here or there, it's like clockwork right now. I mean, the guys are great. It's a great time for everybody on our team. Pretty fantastic. I mean, the hours these guys work and the grind I put them through. If I'm having to dyno 3 or 4 different engines in a day, I got great guys around me that it's not just one guy every time. I might pick on somebody at a different time and be like, hey, I need help for the next couple hours, and here we go. And it's just everything to get what's the word? Preparedness. It's all the preparedness. So we're going to have everything right, get it all lined up here for Indy, try and make some noise at our home track, and go on from there.
Keith, final question for Andrew.
Well, the question I have, and like I say, hopefully, don't take this the wrong way, But I'm just saying, your new responsibilities. You're the crew chief. You're what I call the conductor of the orchestra. You've got all these people working with you, working for you, making sure everything happens. Engine development, new product development. All this responsibility. I'll just say, do you miss it? Sitting on it. You go to Indy, there's an extra bike in the trailer, and like, Andrew, there you go. What, hop on, What would you do?
I've brought that up to Terry a few times. Like, we have a third chassis sitting here that's like kind of our spare in case one of the boys has a very bad weekend and it winds up in a net or something like that. Or heck, even if the truck breaks down and the back half of the axles catch on fire and it lights one bike on fire. Who knows? There's always that thing. But I said, Terry, we should just put this thing together, and we have a short field. I can jump on it. He's like, no, you're the crew chief now. Focus on it. I'm like, I know. I agreed to that a couple years ago. So There's times I miss it. There's times I don't, honestly. I mean, I think probably about the first time that I really understood what I miss, I think Joe Costello was the first person that found out. And that was in Richmond last year at, what was that, our third or fourth race in, Joe?
Yeah.
And I told you, I said, the thing I miss the most is the 10 seconds before you pop the clutch, because that's my time and nobody could mess with my time. So that was probably the most serene time you can ever have, is clearing your head out for those 10 seconds, not paying attention to who's in the other lane. It's just you and the tree. And once that yellow flashes, it's just time to go, and it's game on from there. But that was the point in any drag racer's time where they have to be the most focused. And that's probably the time I missed the most. Yeah, the speed is fun. The acceleration is fun, which over time you lose that sense of acceleration. Your G meter goes numb to it, and you don't feel the 3 Gs through first gear. You feel the difference of the 0.1 or the 0.2 Gs at certain parts of the run. Is the engine pulling at the right RPM? Is it lazy at different parts? Is it suck on the shifts? Is it good at high RPM? Those are all the things that I do miss as being a rider and crew chief, because when I tuned my own bike, it was 70% what I felt in my body G meter. And then I could correlate it with the data from the Motec. Now I don't really have that, but Gaige has given me that conduit to get back there. He can really break down a run and figure out what some things that we can't see on the graph, and then we can correlate that and make a change the next run. He could say, yes, it was better or worse, and we can make a whole motorcycle, whole package better from there. And that's where this bike has gotten better this year. Is it's we talked about it this past race. Like, we built a weapon last year because the bike was so good, and unfortunately, I mean, people saw it on Jill, she was just off on the tree, and we built such a good weapon to make up for some of those deficits that I said last race. I said, now it's a guided missile. It's not just a weapon. So it's pretty fantastic.
Amazing. And I remember that moment, Keith. It was really cool because, I had kind of brought it up earlier, and then he came over and he was like, I know what it is. And it's like the ability to clear my mind of everything else. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again. And that was really cool. And it's fun that you bring that up here and, a couple years later. But I understand. I relate. Like, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. And that was your time to focus and look at the tree. All right. Each episode of Hidden Horsepower ends off with us trying to motivate the next wave of Andrew Hines, machinists, machine shop kids who want to build engines and use their hands and learn machines and try to, make things better. And I've heard a lot of different positive advice in this segment of the show. So what would you say to the person out there who's listening, who's, relatively young person who wants to get into the machine shop trade or something in this arena? What would you say to them to get ahead, to advance?
You got to find that one thing that really drives that passion and finds the fire inside in your brain. I mean, whether it's like, for me, it was what makes the engine tick, and trying to find that next level of performance. And okay, what do I need to achieve that next level of performance? Like, okay, wait, we need an engineer here at the shop that, maybe just doesn't know how to sketch on a CAD program, but understands it. Once I draw this part, where does it go after that? Okay, it goes to the machine shop. From the machine shop, it goes into the engine. So there's a circle there that luckily I've been able to fill what we needed here at the shop. And it's the passion I had for it that drove me to want to learn every aspect of each one of those scenarios. I was a machinist in our shop for 4 years, and I understood the 5-axis machine. That made me a better CAD engineer. I needed to be a CAD engineer because we needed to have somebody that understood the engines to draw the parts correctly and not over-engineer it in one place and under-engineer it in another. So if you're finding something, any part of life that you need to be better in, you can take. It's like, I work in SolidWorks, and a part is nothing typically without its assembly. So there's all these different parts that go into it to make the final product the right piece, whether it's going to school for drafting or mathematics or science or anything like that. There's all these different avenues that have to come together to find and make that one specific thing in your life the best. You just have to find the passion and the will to achieve the best parts of that. And you got to push forward. Sometimes things are hard and you don't want to do it anymore, but in the long run, things will ultimately come out the way you want them to. So it's just a matter of understanding in yourself and finding the right people to help support you along the way, and good things come out of all those situations.
Excellent. Andrew, congratulations. Vance and Hines sweeping the Western Swing, the first 3-race Western Swing for the bikes, maybe the last 3-race Western Swing for all of us.
I hope not. Let's keep going on that one.
Yeah, Bandamere, we got to figure out how to save it or bring it back, or who knows. We'll see,
yeah.
or a new version of the Western Swing, but it'll never be exactly the same without Thunder Mountain, that level of altitude in the air out there. So this was very important, and you guys got it done.
Yeah, you know what? That honestly, I keep thinking, like, people keep saying, well, maybe the last Western Swing ever. And after going to Denver and being there and leaving, and people saying that, now that you make it real, like, yeah, they are saying that's the last Bandamere. So it could actually be the last specific Western Swing of that type. I never thought about it in that context.
Yeah, no, that's it. Like, that's the thing. It was
even
the first.
Even if Bandamere moves to a different location, it's not Bandamere.
It's not Bandamere, right? And from what I gather, I hear people telling me, like, maybe I'm under the impression the answer is no. That if any of them are done, that one is done. But you never know. But yeah, this was a very unique situation. You guys had really one opportunity. The bikes in general had one opportunity to do this one thing for the first and the last. And you guys did it. That's what makes it so special, because there might be another 3-race Western Swing, and we'll call it the Western Swing, but it won't be the one that Joe Amato and Greg Anderson and Tony Schumacher and John Force swept. Those 3, the altitude, then Seattle, and then Sonoma. It will be a different thing that we are calling the Western Swing. It'll be special. Maybe it'll be more special, but it won't be this. And so very unique accolade and accomplishment by you guys, and thank you so much for sharing the details of it here on Hidden Horsepower.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for having us. Great talking to you guys, and I appreciate everything you've done for the drag racing in general and moving the needle on everything. You guys at Total Steel have been fantastic to us over the years, and we really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate everything that you guys do, and your willingness to, we'll say, work together and test all the crazy stuff that we both come up with.
Exactly.
Great job, Drew. Thank you so much. Congratulations once again. Thanks for being on Hidden Horsepower.
No problem. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.
There he goes, Andrew Hines. Keith, that was great stuff. 3.6 horsepower per cubic inch. Keith, that's pretty impressive. Should my mind be blown? Should I have been blown by that already?
It is mind-blowing. The efficiency that these guys are getting out of these things is incredible. But what's funny is, we history gets forgotten and then repeated. And we look at, we've had that mysterious 3 horsepower per cubic inch number for so long, and these guys are exceeding it. But for those guys that love to get on the internet, go look back into the 60s at some of the 20,000 RPM Formula One engines from back in those days. You're talking, flat 12 carburetors. And look at what they made, horsepower per cubic inch. It'll flip your lid.
Yeah, that's insane that they were able to do that stuff with the technology that they had back then, and that, Lake has got it into me, the piston, the starting and the stopping of the piston, right? Like, we keep thinking about that, the piston starting and stopping and starting and stopping, accelerating, decelerating, stopping, going the other direction. That's just amazing that anything holds up to that kind of torment.
It truly is. One of the things Andrew had mentioned was, piston speed, and they had horrible piston speed in the engine. And that's, again, for those younger listeners out there, look up piston speed, because, you can have a very high RPM engine, but because it's got such a big bore and such a short stroke, the piston speed's not bad. So even though it's turning a lot of RPM, the piston's not physically moving that fast. Or we can go the other way around, and we start approaching speeds that are known as sonic, and things start coming apart. And the mass becomes such a critical thing, because as Joe said, we're trying to stop it and start it every time it hits top and bottom dead center and change that direction. It's literally trying to blow itself to pieces every time. And again, it is amazing how this technology's moved forward, and it's done it because guys like Andrew and the entire team there, they want to go faster. Nobody ever comes at you and says, I'll have a little less. I always want more.
Yeah, and Vance and Hines, Andrew's got 6 world championships. Eddie's got 4 world championships. Andrew's got 56 wins. Eddie's got 49 wins. That's just the two of them together. Of course, Matt Hines contributed as well. Plus, Terry and Byron, they are a legendary team, and it's very cool that they're involved in NHRA drag racing in general, with all of the different things that they do. Keith, what about the people out there who are interested in getting a ring package from Total Seal or have a question for you guys? What should they do?
They just need to get online, give us a call, email me. The toll-free is 800-874-2753, totalseal.com. Just reach out to us. We want to hear from you. We want to talk to you. We want to talk about your project. What is it going to take to make your project the best it can be? Just earlier today, I had a gentleman reach out to me. He's got an old 426 dual plug, old Pro Stock engine that's going into a 71 Demon, going to build an old Pro Stock car, and helping him bring the internals of that engine into the modern age. Going to look like all the old stuff on the outside, but it's going to have all the new stuff on the inside. And it's so fun, hearing from these customers and helping them evolve that engine project.
So cool. Also, regarding this podcast, we ask you to subscribe, write a review, all the different things, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. Of course, Total Seal's got a YouTube channel. Lake is on there all day, every day. We're doing episodes, different cool things, the Engine Performance Expo. Just follow along with Total Seal. But Keith, it's been a while. It's been a minute, as the kids say, since we've done some Q&A, like questions from the audience. I think maybe we should get one of those ready. So let's ask the people for their questions.
Absolutely. Reach out to us. Let us know. We need to do a Q&A session. What do you guys want to know? I know what I know, but what don't you know, and what would you like to know? So, let's get all those questions out there. Let's get them asked, and we'll get them answered.
You can send them to through our social media channels, whether it be direct message on Facebook or Twitter or however you follow along. Definitely forward your questions, and we'll compile them, and we'll do a Q&A episode in the future. Keith, great job as usual.
As to you as well, Jim. And I thank you so much for, again, entertaining a goofball like me. I surely appreciate being part of this.
Yeah, I appreciate being a part of it. He's Keith Jones, the Director of Technical Sales for Total Seal Piston Rings. I'm Joe Costello. You can hear more WFO radio podcasts. We interview drag racers like Andrew Hines and winning drag racers like Gaige Herrera, and Alan Reinhart joins us on a regular basis. If you like the NHRA, you can find me there. In the meantime, we'll see you on the next episode of Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal Piston Rings.